People like you don't belong in boardrooms. You belong pushing a mop." He said it loud enough for the entire lobby to hear. He didn't whisper it. He didn't lean in. He said it the way a man says good morning, casually, without a second thought, the way you say something when you have never once in your life been told no. She didn't flinch. Dorothea May Simmons stood at the front desk of Hartwell Capital Group's 42nd floor headquarters, her resume printed on clean white paper, folded in thirds, held in both hands the way her mother taught her to hold anything worth holding. She looked at him, steady, calm. The way still water is calm, not because nothing is underneath it, but because everything underneath it knows how to wait. He plucked the paper from her hands without asking. He glanced at it for maybe 4 seconds. Then he walked to the waste bin beside the receptionist's desk and dropped it in. The lobby went silent. 12 people standing, sitting, waiting. Not one of them moved. Not one of them spoke. A security guard near the elevator studied his shoes. A young associate by the window became very interested in his phone. The receptionist looked at her monitor like it contained the answers to questions no one had asked. He turned back. He smiled. He had no idea who she really was. He had no idea that in 47 minutes, the man who owned this building, who owned the company this man had spent 18 years climbing, would walk through those same lobby doors and stop, would look across the marble floor, and would do something no one in that room had ever seen him do. He had no idea that what he did in the next 4 seconds would end his career, erase his reputation, and cost him everything he had spent a lifetime building. Have you ever walked into a room prepared, qualified, and ready, and been dismissed before you ever opened your mouth? Hold that feeling, because this story is for you. Let me take you back, 72 hours earlier. The neighborhood where Dorothea Simmons had lived for 31 years was the kind of place that didn't photograph well. The houses were small and close together. The yards were chain link and concrete. The streetlights had a way of going out and staying out for weeks before anyone filed a report. But if you had ever actually been inside one of those houses, if you had ever sat at one of those kitchen tables on an early Tuesday morning, you might have understood something that a photograph could never tell you. You might have understood that some places are held together not by money or newness or square footage, but by something older and quieter and more stubborn than any of that. Dorothea's kitchen smelled like coffee and pressed linen. She was up at 5:15, the way she had been up at 5:15 every morning for the past 22 years, since her daughter Renee was born and the world shifted on its axis in the way it does when someone hands you something you would die for. She pressed her uniform shirt on the ironing board by the window, not because she had to, but because her mother had told her once that the way you present yourself is the first sentence of every conversation you will ever have. And Dorothea had never forgotten it. She had worked as a contract cleaner at Hartwell Capital Group for 11 years, 42 hours a week. She knew the building the way a person knows a place they have loved quietly and without recognition. Every floor, every corridor, every conference room that smelled like stale coffee on Monday mornings and ambition on Thursday afternoons. She knew which elevator was slow and which one was fast. She knew that the 4th floor men's room always had a leak around the second sink. She knew that the CEO's office on the 42nd floor had a view of the river that turned gold at 4:15 on winter afternoons, and that the man who sat behind that desk had never once in 11 years looked up from his monitor to see it. She also knew things about that building that no one on its payroll had ever bothered to learn. Dorothea had a degree, 2 of them. She had earned her bachelor's in business administration from Langston University in 1991, working nights and weekends while she cleaned office buildings to pay for it. She had earned her MBA from the same university in 1994, graduating second in her class. She had spent 4 years after that working as a financial analyst for a small firm in Tulsa that closed when the market turned. She had spent 2 years after that trying to get back in, sending applications, going to interviews, wearing the good suit, printing the clean resume. She had learned, slowly and then all at once, that a name like Dorothea Simmons on a resume, with a Tulsa address and a gap year and a contract cleaning job, had a way of going unanswered. So she had kept cleaning, but she had also kept learning. Every evening after Renee was asleep, Dorothea sat at the kitchen table with her yellow legal pad and her financial textbooks and the laptop she had bought secondhand for $230. And she studied. She tracked markets. She read quarterly reports. She built models on spreadsheet software that would have embarrassed some of the junior analysts whose offices she vacuumed every Tuesday and Friday. She kept notes in a leather-bound journal, dark green, initials pressed in gold on the lower right corner, DMS, that her mother had given her the day she graduated with her first degree. The journal was 22 years old. Its spine was repaired with black electrical tape. Its pages were dense with ink, columns of numbers, margin notes in her small, precise handwriting. She carried it in her work bag every day, not because she needed it at work, but because her mother had told her never to leave the most important part of yourself somewhere you couldn't protect it. She didn't know, that Tuesday morning, pressing her shirt in the 5:15 dark, that she should have listened a little more carefully to that advice. She had applied for the open position, the junior analyst role on the 42nd floor. She had printed her resume on the good paper, 24-pound, cream white, the kind that feels like it means something, and she had formatted it carefully, and she had taken it upstairs, and she had introduced herself to the receptionist, and she had waited. The man who came out of the inner office was named Preston Whitfield III. He was 44 years old. He was the chief operating officer of Hartwell Capital Group. He had gone to Exeter, and then to Dartmouth, and then directly, without interruption, into a series of positions at companies where his father or his father's friends had made calls on his behalf. He had never in his life pressed a shirt at 5:15 in the morning. He wore them already pressed, delivered on hangers, charged to the corporate account. He looked at Dorothea the way some people look at furniture they don't want to buy. He took the resume. He read 4 seconds of it. He dropped it in the bin. "People like you don't belong in boardrooms," he said. "You belong pushing a mop." He laughed. A short, satisfied laugh. The kind that doesn't need a response because the person making it doesn't imagine one is possible. Then he said something else. Something quieter, just for the receptionist, though the lobby was quiet enough that Dorothea heard every word. He said, "Tell building services we need to update the sign-in policy. I don't want cleaning staff wandering up here during business hours. It makes the place look bad." He turned and went back through the glass doors. The receptionist looked at Dorothea with something on her face that might have been pity or shame or both. Dorothea nodded once. She turned to go. And that was when Preston Whitfield III made the decision that sealed his fate, though he didn't know it yet. He had followed her back out. She didn't know why. Perhaps he wanted to make sure she left. Perhaps he simply wasn't finished. Some people are never finished. He saw her work bag on the bench by the elevator where she had set it when she came in. He saw the dark green journal sticking out of the top. He picked it up. "What's this?" he said, not really asking. The way a man handles something that belongs to someone else when he has decided it doesn't. "Please don't," Dorothea said. Quiet. Still, he opened it. He flipped through a few pages, her columns of numbers, her market analyses, her 22 years of careful thinking. He made a face like he was reading something in a language he found amusing. "Playing pretend," he said. And he said it on the edge of the waste bin. Not in it, on the edge of it. Just balanced there. A performance. Dorothea walked to the waste bin and picked up the journal. She held it against her chest with both hands. She looked at him one more time. She said nothing. She pressed the elevator button. She waited. She left. But what Preston Whitfield III did not know, what he could not have known, because he had spent his entire career in rooms where no one had ever told him the things he needed to hear, was that the dark green journal with the gold initials was not just a journal, and Dorothea May Simmons was not just a cleaner, and the man who owned Hartwell Capital Group was not a stranger to either of those facts. Go back to the moment she picked up that journal from the edge of the waste bin. Look at how she holds it. Watch her hands, because what's in that journal is not just notes. 47 minutes. That was how much time Preston Whitfield III had from the moment Dorothea walked out of that lobby to the moment his entire world changed. He didn't know that. He went back to his office. He had a 10 o'clock. He had a lunch. He had 18 years of accumulated certainty that the world worked the way he believed it did, and nothing that had happened in the last 15 minutes had given him any reason to question that. He was wrong. Let me tell you who Dorothea Simmons really was. Her father was Clarence Simmons. Most people in Oklahoma City knew the name. Clarence Simmons had started a small investment firm in 1969 with $11,000 he had saved over 12 years of working 2 jobs, days at the post office, evenings at a machine shop. He had built that firm, Simmons Capital, into one of the most quietly powerful black-owned financial institutions in the southwestern United States. Not flashy, not in the newspapers. but solid and principled and built on the kind of long vision that doesn't need to announce itself. Clarence Simmons had died in 2003. He had left the firm to his daughter. Not because she was his daughter, but because she was the only one who had understood it from the inside, who had sat beside him at that same kitchen table where she later kept her own yellow legal pads and learned from him the way you learn from someone when you know that every word they say is borrowed time. Simmons' capital had grown in the years since Clarence's death. Dorothea had run it quietly through a management trust while she kept her life in Tulsa, kept her contract cleaning work, kept her mornings at 5:15. She had not announced herself. She had seen no reason to. Her father had taught her that the work was what mattered, not the recognition, not the title, not the room you sat in. The management trust held 43% of Simmons Capital's shares. Simmons Capital held a 19.7% stake in Hartwell Capital Group. Hartwell Capital Group's chairman of the board, the man who had quietly courted that stake for 4 years, who had flown to Tulsa twice and to Oklahoma City 3 times for dinners that never appeared in any press release, was a 71-year-old man named George Ashworth. And George Ashworth was, at this precise moment, 43 minutes away from walking through the lobby doors of his own building to attend a board meeting that Dorothea Simmons had specifically requested to observe. He had been the one to call her 6 weeks ago. He had heard about the open analyst position. He made it his business to know about open positions that touched his board's operations. He had suggested she apply. He had said it would be good to have her in the room. He had not told Preston Whitfield III that she was coming because he had not thought it necessary. He thought it necessary now. Dorothea did not call him. That is important to understand. She did not call George Ashworth from the elevator. She did not text him. She did not send anyone a message. She walked out of the building the way she had walked in, quietly, steadily, her journal held against her chest, and she sat in her car in the parking garage and she opened the journal to a clean page and she wrote the date and the time and 3 words at the top of the page. Remember this day. Then she drove to a diner 2 blocks away and ordered coffee and waited. She was not waiting for justice. She was not waiting for rescue. She was waiting because she had learned, over 53 years of being Dorothea May Simmons, that the world has a way of correcting itself when you are patient enough to let it, and that the most powerful thing you can do in the moment when someone tries to diminish you is to remain, completely and absolutely yourself. She was on her 2nd cup of coffee when her phone rang. It was George Ashworth's assistant. The board meeting had been moved up. Could she come back at 11:15? She looked at her watch. It was 10:28. She left a $20 bill on the table for a $7 coffee because her mother had raised her to tip the way you want to be treated, and she drove back. The 42nd floor of Hartwell Capital Group was mid-meeting when the elevator opened. Preston Whitfield III was standing at the head of the conference table. He had his jacket on and his posture arranged and his voice calibrated to the particular frequency it reached when he needed to sound like the most important person in the room. He was in the middle of a sentence about Q3 projections when the conference room door opened and his assistant leaned in and said the chairman was here. George Ashworth walked in. George Ashworth was not a large man, but he had a way of entering rooms that made them seem smaller than they had been a moment before. He was 71, silver-haired, unhurried. He had not built Hartwell Capital by accident or by inheritance. He had built it over 40 years of work that started before most of the people in this room were born, and the weight of that was visible in the way he moved, not heavy, but certain. The kind of certain that comes from knowing exactly what you have and what it cost. He walked to the head of the table. He nodded at the people seated there. Then he looked at the door. Dorothea Simmons walked in behind him. She had her work bag over one shoulder. She had her dark green journal under her arm. She was wearing the same clothes she had been wearing 2 hours ago. The clean, pressed uniform blouse, the dark trousers, the low, flat shoes. She had not changed. She had not needed to. George Ashworth looked at her and said, "I'm glad you made it." And then he did something that made Preston Whitfield III's blood go cold. He saluted her. Not a military salute, he had not served, but a gesture of unmistakable, deliberate respect. A slight bow of the head, both hands at his sides. The posture of a man acknowledging something larger than himself. The room was absolutely silent. Preston Whitfield III stood at the head of his table and felt the floor tilt beneath him. George Ashworth turned to the room. "I want to introduce Dorothea May Simmons," he said. She is the principal beneficiary and managing trustee of Simmons Capital, which holds a 19.7% ownership stake in this company. She is also, as of this morning, a formal candidate for a seat on this board. He paused. I understand she was here earlier today to deliver her application for an analyst position. I understand that application was not received as it should have been. He looked at Preston Whitfield III. He did not look away. I'd like to discuss that. Preston Whitfield III's face went the color of old chalk. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. The woman he had laughed at was sitting down at his conference table. She opened her dark green journal to a clean page. She uncapped her pen. She looked at him with the same steady, patient calm she had looked at him with 2 hours ago. The same eyes, the same stillness. He had dismissed her. He had laughed. He had balanced her journal on the edge of a waste bin. He was done. What happened next did not take long, but it covered a great deal of ground. The board meeting that afternoon was not the board meeting anyone had prepared for. The Q3 projections were not discussed. George Ashworth called an emergency executive session at 2 o'clock, with 2 members of the company's general counsel present and the head of human resources and the head of compliance. Preston Whitfield III was asked to give an account of what had happened in the lobby at 9:47 that morning. He gave one. It was not the right one. He said that he had not known who she was. He said that he had simply been enforcing the building's professional standards. He said that the word cleaning staff was not meant to demean. He said, people like you had been taken out of context. Dorothea Simmons did not raise her voice. She did not interrupt him. When he was finished, she opened her journal and read aloud, from the notes she had made at the diner, the exact words she had heard, the exact sequence of events, the exact time, the exact behavior of every person in that lobby. She was precise. She was calm. She was devastating. Hartwell Capital's general counsel asked Preston Whitfield III to wait outside. It took 11 minutes. When the counsel came back, Preston Whitfield III was informed that he was being placed on immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation. He was informed that his building access would be suspended. He was informed that the company would be issuing a formal written apology to Ms. Simmons and that the investigation would be conducted by an independent outside firm. He asked who had authorized this. George Ashworth, standing in the doorway, said, I did. Preston Whitfield III left the 42nd floor of Hartwell Capital Group at 3:44 in the afternoon. He rode down alone in the elevator. He walked through the same lobby where 6 hours earlier he had dropped a woman's resume in the trash and told her she belonged pushing a mop. The security guard by the elevator was still there. He did not study his shoes this time. He watched Preston Whitfield III walk out. That night, a video appeared on social media. It had been recorded by a young associate who had been standing near the window that morning, the one who had found his phone very interesting. He had not found his conscience quite so quickly, but he had found it eventually. The video showed 38 seconds of the lobby interaction. It did not show everything. It didn't need to. By midnight, it had 400,000 views. By the following morning, it had crossed 2 million. The phrase "people like you" was trending on 3 platforms. A hashtag formed, hashtag Dorothea's Journal. People were sharing it with photographs of notebooks, diaries, legal pads, every record of a life's work that someone had tried to dismiss. News outlets called Hartwell Capital Group's communications department. They called Dorothea Simmons. They called George Ashworth. Ashworth released a short statement through the company that said, Hartwell Capital Group does not tolerate discrimination in any form. We are conducting a full review of our hiring practices and corporate culture. We are grateful to Ms. Simmons for her patience and her integrity. Grateful. For her patience. 22 years of it? The investigation concluded in 41 days. Its findings were thorough and, to anyone who had been paying attention, unsurprising. Preston Whitfield III had not acted alone in the culture that permitted what he did. He had acted within it. The investigation found 17 documented instances over 9 years in which complaints about his conduct, from employees, from job applicants, from contract workers, had been received by human resources and marked reviewed without substantive action. It found a pattern of hiring decisions that consistently disadvantaged candidates from certain backgrounds, regardless of qualification. It found that the building's sign-in policy had been revised twice in 5 years in ways that specifically restricted access for contract cleaning staff, revisions that had been initiated by Preston Whitfield III and approved without question. He was terminated, not placed on leave. Terminated, with cause. His 18 years of accumulated stock compensation, which vested on a rolling basis, was subject to clawback provisions that the company's general counsel confirmed applied to terminations for cause. The number was significant. The number was not made public, but the people who needed to know it knew it. Hartwell Capital Group announced a new hiring initiative, real, specific, funded, not a press release. A partnership with 4 historically black colleges and universities to create a pipeline for analyst and associate positions, a new independent ombudsman office, a revised complaint and review process with external oversight, mandatory bias training that was not a video you clicked through but a structured program with accountability built in. Dorothea Simmons was offered a seat on the board. She accepted. At her first board meeting, she brought the dark green journal. She set it on the table in front of her. She did not open it during the meeting. She did not need to. It was enough that it was there, repaired spine and all. 22 years of thinking that had been balanced on the edge of a waste bin by a man who had confused the container for the contents. She also brought something else, a check, made out to the Hartwell Capital Group Foundation from Simmons Capital for $500,000, earmarked, per the cover letter she had written in her own hand, for expanded financial literacy programming in public schools in historically underserved communities in Oklahoma and Texas. The memo line on the check read, CES, for Clarence Eugene Simmons, her father, who had started with $11,000 and a belief that the work was what mattered. George Ashworth, sitting at the head of the table, looked at the check. He looked at Dorothea. He said, "Your father would be proud." She said, "He already was." 1 year later, the Simmons Hartwell Financial Scholars Program enrolled its first class of 16 students from Title I high schools across 5 cities. Each student received a full scholarship for a 2-year finance and business track at a partner HBCU, a mentoring relationship with a Hartwell Capital analyst, and a summer internship that paid a real salary, not a stipend, a salary. The program was announced at a ceremony in Oklahoma City in a conference room at a community center 3 miles from the street where Dorothea Simmons had grown up. She spoke for 11 minutes. She did not use notes. She held the dark green journal in her hands while she spoke, the way her mother had taught her to hold anything worth holding. She told the 16 students in front of her that the world would sometimes try to tell them where they belonged, that sometimes the world would be very ill,